There is no conceivable way to imagine the ruling powers in their system are legitimate. Legislators accept campaign contributions and speaking fees, bribes, from weapons manufacturers and oil and coal profiteers and polluters and private prison companies. These same legislators pass laws that make it legal to sell weapons to the highest bidder, to destroy the planet, to lock up immigrants and dissenters. There are lots of flimsy rationalizations. Our leaders are democratically elected. Ha! We get a choice of candidates both financed by the same corporations. Corporations are waging a nonstop propaganda campaign to make you think you live in a democracy, while in fact they control every detail of our lives. There are lots of flimsy rationalizations, but the true reason why people accept the idea that the ruling powers and their system are legitimate is that we believe deep in our hearts that might makes right. We worship power, wealth, glitz and glamour, and shrug indifferently when confronted with the suffering of the poor and helpless. People don't mind hearing lies. Why? Because we have no intellectual conscience. Why? Because we believe in our hearts that might makes right. Why do we believe this? Because corporations and their owners have been waging a non-stop war on the human conscience. A deep and profound reverence for mercy, kindness, love, and justice is inconvenient for corporations who want to increase their profits by being merciless, cruel, and unjust. So what do corporations do? They wage a non-stop propaganda campaign against any and all principles of morality. How do they do this? By including scenes in films and shows where any mention of a moral principle is immediately followed by a laugh track, by bribing pundits and professors to teach the deluded populace that the sole moral principle is obey, by holding up sellouts and con artists as moral exemplars. Corporations and their owners have been waging a non-stop war on the human conscience. Why? So they can perform profitable, unconscionable acts with no opposition. Human beings with a conscience would not lock up immigrants in cages. Human beings with a conscience would not wage war on helpless people. Human beings with a conscience would not manufacture weapons for sale to tyrants. But these things are profitable things for corporations to do. So, corporations work overtime to destroy the human conscience. Sadly, it is working all too well. I'm not saying there's a specific plan or a conspiracy. It's even worse than that. A conspiracy would take account of the effect of its actions, the actions it conspired to carry out. The reality is worse than that. Corporations act on the basis of the principle maximize profit and shareholder value. This means the corporations are indifferent to everything other than profit and shareholder value. If locking up innocent people is profitable, it should be done. If selling weapons to the highest bidder is profitable, it should be done. If destroying the planet is profitable, it should be done. And of course, executives who operate on the basis of this principle of maximizing profit at whatever cost in human suffering and human lives want to believe this principle is a moral principle. So they preach what they practice. They teach the principle to others. They fund university professors to preach that maximizing profit is the pinnacle of virtue. They teach us that warlords and profiteers of pollution are our most exemplary citizens. Sadly, it's working. It's working very well. The populace gapes in awe and admiration at the very people who oppress and exploit us. Anyone who talks about any principle other than maximizing profit is dismissed as lunatic, conspiracy theorist, idealist, bleeding heart, snowflake. The war on the human conscience is working. Conscience is decimated. Its last remnants hide in trenches, running from the bombs. Since the mind is trained to see conscience as the enemy, the mind even wages war on itself, killing off whatever traces of conscience remain, hardening the heart, melting the snowflake. As the planet cooks in its own fumes and warlords build more and more weapons of doom, no trace of conscience remains to complain. All hearts are hardened. Obedience is the sole moral principle. Obey, say the warlords. Do not feel or think or exhibit any sympathy for suffering. If you begin to develop a conscience, you will no longer be able to function in a society where conscience is outlawed. You will be labeled sick, depressed, diseased. You will be medicated and sedated. The treatment is scientifically refined. Resistance is futile. Defeat is inevitable, say the profiteers of doom. You too will enlist in the battle against conscience. You too will make war on the last remaining vestiges of sympathy and love in your own heart. You too will get back to work for the system of death and destruction, full of eagerness to obey.